아래랑 기호숨게 람미림베 냠네 제당은 저기 산 달바다 탐지 김묘고 와도발라 니기호숨게 람미림베 냠네 제발라 때네 토쿠에서단 디냠네 제다기림바 기호숨게 람미림베 냠네 제발라 안당봉한 저기 지게 직 퇴바다 퇴베 된들라 삼 디네 공고고르바 지사데 퇴바들라네 퇴발라 아니 생기스네 퇴고고 인자 안게 야 나를 최딩에 계획신이 안디 계획신이 이제 다들 자다 계획신이 된소리 고셔야 돼 디고셔야 될 그 생각도 가르치버스네 계획신이 된소리라 안에 가서라 삼배 된소다 주외 된소니 요래제 삼배 된소들라 아니 자와 대바 자와단 그린 지수제 바세제 어두스제나 대바장 대바디 느낌제 직대바 장고비 김제한테 대바디다 저게 개와 람냠는 제바 탐지기 대바디 저 만화시리에 세네 자와디리 세네 그 생각도 디고를 마시 살주로.
Good evening. So we're looking at our text here on the middle Lamrim, which presents the complete and unmistaken trainings that one needs to engage in order to attain enlightenment. And these are presented in the sequence of trainings in which one needs to engage. So to be able to cultivate the various qualities within, the qualities of the Dharma within, one needs to hear teachings extensively, and whilst doing so, reflect and then meditate on them. So to hear teachings, to gather the knowledge of the Dharma, one requires a spiritual teacher. And this is the chapter that we are in now, that are looking at how to rely on a spiritual teacher. And the outline that we started to look at last week was, in particular, how to rely on the spiritual teacher. And we saw this as two subdivisions. The first was to rely in thought, and thereafter to rely in action. And relying in thought itself has two subdivisions, and there we are on the first of training in faith, which we saw is the very root of relying on the spiritual teacher.
아니 지마 송야당 아니야 관에 공도 표하셔봐디 디치거레스 지산 대바체디 계침버레스 되게 디고르마 쉬르와당도.
Last week we looked at how to train in faith, how to generate it newly, or if it has already given rise, to ensure that it is stable and flourishes and grows rather than wanes or declines.
디레야당 어제 nenma 다라 대바디 계침부 임비기 금전으로 쉬어리도 하든마 대야 디는 쉬어 대야 라마라 지더라 따와니 나 라나도지 원구윤 규레 상회 따보스 르벨라 네 르메 지더라 따와 자시나 상회 좀된 대라 지다와 신도스.
We'll continue then where we finished last week, which is in that same outline, so there's no need to review any further, because the text will cover similar points. So we're starting either in the handout at the very top of page 43, or in the published text in the middle of page 37, or near the bottom of page 37. So it's a quotation from the Tantra bestowing the initiation of Vajrapani. O Lord of Secrets, how should a student see his master? Just like he would see the Buddha, the Blessed One.
Dan lana dojela wanggu gu sedi dinalia karyorasinem lana doje sedi janjisemba denichigi ane ya shue sul shubarela ne sangye tapol shubare se or lana wanggu gu le sangye tapola shubares kana kare shubarela ne gaje dual masonwa je shusen dual ko barwada 수고 발생 라나도 지고 발에 술고 발에서는 차나도 지고 발에 더 지고데 가르스고 발에서는 로벌라 로미 지들 다와자스 지상한테 로먹이 로벌이야 가르스다 호레 세지고 거와 Delia, Lane de la Sound de Lane Garsonsone, Sangi Jumnen de la Jidawa Shindu, Sangi Jumnen de la Canista Gubiti, Nashin Tao, the Sumarese, Landia.
Thus, being a Tantra, it was a teaching from the Buddha, and it was an initiation of Ajapani. So here we should understand that a bodhisattva was asking a question, and the Buddha replied. And the question then was that how should one see one's master? And then, as we have in the translation, one should see him just as Buddha Shakyamuni.
Sanyu Jumne de la Gandista Gorsna, Sanyu Jumne de Sayadida, Jiggy. Gyun Tamje Dan Jawa, Sonyi Nyamsulin, the Tarchimba, and Dobe, and then Tamje Topsawa, and Gyun Tamje Dan Jawa, Sanji said it in the said, and the Guy and then the Sungu and there, and then he bought them about your ass, Dushin to do some Dangor, Sanyu Jim, then they said the Canessa, San Gabare, or San Yes and Yomba, Basha the Japan Towers. The Yundin Malu, but Chasan can't Tower Kembare, said, Sinan Kempanto, Yunde, Tarchimari, said. And the that Tarchim by Inza, and that Shanlia, Chu, Timbala, Canis Timber in a tin to war, and the Shanji, Nitchig, Chu, Timbala, Canis Netin, and do that number of Kundu, Shanlia, and the Pembigi, Jawajanya, Shan, Dunga, and Tiki Tubiaki, Pembe, Jawajanya to war, as that's on Yit in Angor, as Dusin and Sangila Tagor, Wadusin. So that the that Lama and Dinashin Tawori, as
Buddha Shakyamuni, being a Buddha, is a perfected being, perfected in both having abandoned all faults completely and developed each and every good quality to the level of perfection. Those are the attributes that define a Buddha. Moreover, a Buddha, perfected being, has immeasurable good qualities of body, speech, and mind. So therefore, recognizing these qualities in the Buddha, seeing the Buddha as a perfected being, one knows that one can rely wholeheartedly, one can entrust oneself completely to the Buddha, in that the Buddha will never deceive one. The Buddha will never give one advice that is flawed. And this is how one should relate to one's Lama. This is how one should relate to one's spiritual teacher, seeing him as the Buddha.
Was the Sik Daga, Sik Dushin, some time at the Donas, Sik Ranglang, some time in the San Yu Jumden de la Jidawash was Sik Delia, Denudushin, some time by the Shena, Chik Teshe Yavana, and the Jena Lama Delaya, Gun Tamje Bawa, Yunet Tamje and Demba, and the G, to the number with Shenle, Pembe Jawa, Yang didn't to Penchire, some big Dushin, some Dangore, says she wrote that.
So, as we see in the translation, we should see the Buddha. How should one see the master? Just like he would see the Buddha, or see him just as the Buddha. So, it's in other words, by going just on what the text says here, one should see one's spiritual teacher, one's Lama, as free of fault, as a perfected being.
That the member shen Tabachimbi Dode Dang, Tabachimbi Dode, and the naked Dode Nale, and Chilamalia, Sanginashan Tawarish Sonyorege, Tabachimbi Dode Dang, Duole and Deder Sumba Yudo was in Duishunalea and Dushines Lamalea, that you are Sanginashan Tawari said, Dushines Sonyorege, Jezada, Gudan, Dodan, and Duishun Chazanalia, Dushines Sonyorege order.
The text continues. By Lama Tsongkhapa, he says, similar statements can be found in the collection of Mahayana Sutras and in the Vinaya. So the point being made here is the quotation that is provided is from the Buddha, but in a Tantra. And Lama Tsongkhapa is saying there are further statements from the Buddha in the Sutras as well, in both the Mahayana Sutras and in the Vinaya.
And Sanje Jumden de la Jidawa, Jidawa Shindu, Sanje Jumden de la Jidawa, Dijindu, says 6 Yorba, 디 돈다디 다 송고다 제름시 돈다디 가르치고 디기 돈다디 가르치고 고고래라나 대다게 되니 사제 직대다 되니기 라말이야 안에 상계를 따와지다 나 따고래서야디 규다 돈나라 두유신나라 송바디 돈다디 가르치고 고래서나다 돈 대다게 되니 상계 지들 상계 임발시나 내가 견도고 로미중신 연된 셈비고 로중화 따라서
Now, Lama Tsongkhapa continues to explain the statement above, which was that how should one see one's teacher, one's master, and the answer is to see him as the Buddha. And this is then expanded on or explained by Lama Tsongkhapa. Their meaning is this: if you understand that someone is just like a Buddha, so I think we can add that in there. If you understand that someone is just like a Buddha, a mind finding fault with him will not arise, and a mind contemplating his excellent qualities will.
지다 상계 임바 시나 세정한도지 야 상계 임바도 하고나 안에 가려운 거라서네 내가 견도 걸로 중 말했어. 제자디 견도 너주래셔서 견 통비로디 기 말했어. 그래서 상계 임바 하고나 서로 와다가 견 차상 빠와 연단 탐지 톱사와도 하고나 견 차상 빠사와 임 하고는 견 디견 디두세데 견도로 기 말와서 그래. 내가 견도 걸로 미기신. 근데 연된 셈비로 중 라서 이다디 연된디네 누와디네 연된 누와스베 연된디게 차상 하고 별로기 삼기기로 와서 그러다. 제가 상계를 양아주 상계디 상지들 상계 임바디 간주 하고 봐이나 아니 상계세야디 가르치려고 그래서는 견 디바군세 님보 공부도기 견 탐제다 빵 차와지리 제가 연된 말로바 차상지 캔 차와지리 투추바지리 선배게 되네 하고 요도 되네 상계를 견 차상 빵 차와 하고 요도 견의 통말 와지 견의 선배 견 통역을 로균이 기기 말했어. 연된 차상 투수 처벌해서 두 사고들이 산얘기 연된디게 차상도 하고 통으로 와서 그래. 제가 견도고 로미중시 연된 셈별 로중라서 연된 양야삼다별로 시키기 위해서 그래.
The meaning of the statement is, as we have here, is if one knows one's teacher is a Buddha, one will know that he is a perfected being. And being a perfected being has these two defining characteristics of all faults have been perfectly abandoned. So therefore, the teacher cannot possess faults because the teacher, being a Buddha, is freed of faults. So therefore, logically, as he is a Buddha, he can have no faults. He has to be free of faults. Moreover, being a Buddha, and just like a Buddha, all good qualities have been perfected. They aren't partially developed, but perfectly developed, or developed to the level of perfection. So understanding, therefore, that the teacher is a Buddha, seeing him just like a Buddha, then one will not, seeing faults in him will not arise to one's mind, but one will only recognize good qualities.
나도 상계랑을 시고를 제일 남아게 시고만 상계호로 지당한 상계세야 돼 간지세야 돼 균 지금도 균 냠냠 곰 냠는 저 곰비 또비 균 담제다 방와레스 매와 책 방바다 하고 얘네 균 담제 방 연단 담제 투수 취바데 하고요도 안 하고요도 안 상계래 균되는 시어래서 균되는 수지 균 통약으로 균이 말했어 안 그런 것도 연된 통약으로 자자 기공으로 와서 그래 기로 와서 하 되네기 체명해 봐니는 되네기 아니야로 와다 그래서 나대가 저기다 나주로 지 상계세대 지게 체명해 봐 많이 봐 내가 안도 가르쳐 볼 상계세대 균 담지다 빠서 균균의 요 말 상계래 균균의 요 말 연된 풍숨 소바냐게 마도 균균의 요 말 새벽에 당아주 지게 상계세대 체명해 봐 많이 봐 내가 저기 두시네 지게 라미다 되네게 기비신 되네 송백에 데플로바다 되네 삼다비 땅이 김세 삼다도 김세 삼다 되네 시도 상계세의 뇽모 번이 보대용 곰 제도신 탈치바레세 제스 김세 삼다유도 안 상계를 균균해요 말에 연단장야리 선배 삼로디 만주지 연구로 받아.
When you read the sentence from Lama Tsongkhapa, if you understand that someone is just like a Buddha, a mind finding fault with him will not arise, and a mind contemplating his excellent qualities will. This is then referring to someone who has studied well and reflected deeply on the qualities of the Buddha, and therefore knows that a Buddha is a perfected being. So this is describing how someone who has come to realize with valid cognition, or has come to ascertain or determine that a Buddha is free of faults. So for such a person who has this realization, this is how they would experience their teacher. But for those who have yet to realize that a Buddha is a perfected being, so someone like ourselves, we understand this intellectually, but we are yet to realize it. We therefore are not quite how it's being described here. For us, we still need to study and reflect much more deeply on the qualities of the Buddha to truly come to realize that the Buddha is a perfected being.
dine za din sangye chimba shena dine gyön do lo ma ge yöndan ge ya thoy lo gi du was dina shin da nga ju ge lama den de nga ju la lama la gyön thoya ge da ji thoya ge nyang a ji ga ju nam yun ne da lama sa de a ju ge ji nga ju da ji ba ro ji ta mai bi ge nam ba ra dön shi du si pe de we yin za gyön thoya ge nga ju ge ji ge tikasore gyön thoyagalya nyemba chik ka lelabo shiuyor wa de gyön chi tongchochor shimur wa dine inza lama layang chedu jade sore gyön doba nam 탐제도 dorje yuan doba lo zhongwa sore jesa lama layang gyön doba ge lam samle pa ga jin dine ge gyön tongguye ne da pa samle pa ga ka Lama yuan tong yuan代表洛江江界给把中度的结果了解洛中国了解，这在商界新的到我说的商界了，捐多比洛没用的yuan tong比洛界话南新Lama来样啊这个捐多比洛的怕界嘛就把这干，yuan tong洛的怕解决些中度的结果了解了公布了解了他的。
So therefore that line really describes someone who has already studied and reflected deeply on the qualities of the Buddha, and therefore they have gained realization with valid cognition that the Buddha is a perfected being, a faultless being. For us, though, we have not realized this yet, which means when we see our teacher, we see him really as someone who's ordinary, maybe more special than us, but still is ordinary, and therefore faults in him readily appear to our mind. So this is the actual situation that we find ourselves in. And so for ordinary people for practitioners such as ourselves, who are not the kind of practitioner described in that sentence, the next sentence is more relevant for us. Likewise, with regard to a guru, eliminate any concept of fault in every aspect and train the mind that conceives excellent qualities. So this sentence then is relevant for ourselves, because this is the sentence for the practitioner who still needs to train their mind in recognizing the Buddha, the Lama as a Buddha. Whereas the previous line is relevant for someone who has already gained realization, and for them, the faults just will not appear and only qualities will. But for us, where faults in the teacher do readily appear, we need to train our mind. And where good qualities are still hidden for us, we need to train our mind.
la sangye le ji da wa xin du ce de sangye le gyön tong yu lo da yuan dan jiang ya tong yu gyön tong yu lo ma jie ba jie yuan dan tong yu lo ji gi du as di na xie Lama la ya gyön tong yu lo de pa ga jie ma ju ba jie sangye le ma jie wa na xie Lama la gyön tong yu lo de jie ju yo ma da ga hu le ce le ji ba do ma ane sangye le yuan dan tong yu lo jie wa na xie Lama la yun den to lo jie le pa jiang de jie wo le jiang jie an ju jiang wo le se de zhe jumden de yi jumden de le ji da wa xin du wo se de duan da di le song wo da jie rum ji.
So therefore the advice that Lama Tsongkhapa is giving us here, or how is explaining that we should practice the teaching of the Buddha, is that we need to train our mind to see our teacher as being just like the Buddha. So that when faults appear to us, in dependence on our training, to immediately recognize that this is a mistaken perception from our side, and therefore to not grasp at those faults, but to let them go. And similarly, if we're struggling to see faults, to recognize that that's not due to the faults lacking in the teacher, because the teacher is just like the Buddha. And therefore, we recognize that the limitation is still within ourselves, and we need to train our mind further.
기부 치료 추선 림베기 돈에 냠냠len 제도 갑라 라마텐제 라마티제네 추슈 냠len 제도 갑라 균능부 된 거로와 제 이미지리아 기부 수밀라미림바 파시에 지금 제 변에 라마치스의 왕지 쉬시네 안에 왕지 쉬안 차지 쉬는데 로망마투가 지어로와데 딜견시라 타야게 고급 요마로와데 가서는 왕지 쉬 살지마도 쉬요마로와데 주식감 이미지기도 안되네 기시라 두고 말아봐. 아니 제 다들 가르순고라선 데서 야 람림 냠네지도 신의 기부 중요 람이림비 기부 투모에 기부 총 투모 람이림바 파제 람마절바 최슈딘마 냠네지지 슈균보 되네야마 디차선에 되네마 아니 기부 딩게 람이림비 투모 람이림바디 파지 주 디자는 최슈 되네 검잡 되네야 디차선에 기부 챔비어 람이림비 람이림바디 파슈 안된 마음 여주 되네 라마다님 유능부도 구도하되네 제 유능부 근데 유능부들이 내내 견토야다 안서지 지게 망아 연구로 와데 가르네 제가 도시네 연구로 와 내내 인자 데니기 라마테난게 림바데라 조 디디고 송고다 디소 라마테나도 따고 서송야디 마다 지다니 라마수이네 왕지신 라마테는 템바이나 소수는 뮤디테 따고 월데 이나 데수잖아 아니 저 통야래야 통야로 똑바기야래 저 타는 부로 와자 제가 뮤인딩아도 모두 이진 라마스 도스텐제 최슈되데라 아니 데니기 인자다 콜랍제르스 데니기 모티스투체 공부를 장고를 해야지 또 송거로와 안디아디네제 기부 준비되네지 당하게 냐면고 셰베네 라마디스는 최주 모티유지마 균능보다 야 똑고 권에 것도 소소다디로 배능하는 주기 제가 담아진 최슈 소소고 이제 당하 삼로 되는 실내서 되는 연구도 해야다 안지야 라마리아 쉬야다 라이메마 대야지야 야지마 어두신 안가된 연구도 되네시네 지도 어달라메기 그런 디지나 지고 말되네 공부를 디체고를 세지 유사제 쇼르바다 라마즈네 쉬쉬 소소에 냠는지 네 삼로 나다 디니치네 디네 삼로 디네 연구도 세시에 쇼르바 기티에 쇼르바다 지고래 말해라데 달라메 어디지네 그런 지고 디네 다가랑 공부를 해야다 디는 지금은 어디진 노트제 디 삼담에 디네 삼담 거래서 쉬에 나요르와 두신 라메게 되는 라메천이 주다 된바 고고에서 키신셰에 다르와 데니게 라메게 냠는 지림바파 된 주치데 데니 디 라메다 야시 두고 라메다 야시 지고 라메게다 타녀부로 와다 녀담치 주네 지기자 데니 자다 라메게 지게 두치네 아니 견 토야다 파지 내갑디니 견로 춘춘 통외네 대수 남산파 견 가야게 탑시에다 아니 지금 지연네 파
In general, most students have several teachers, and with different teachers, they will have different relationships. So where this advice is being given is not so much for the teachers that one only occasionally meets, So, for example, if one has received initiation from someone, that is that kind of teacher whom one has just received one or perhaps several initiations, that's a teacher one only rarely sees and has a particular relationship with them. Usually, with such teachers, one doesn't easily see faults in them for the simple reason that one spends very little time in their company. And when one only comes occasionally in their presence, and it's just for a short while, then usually it's a very joyous occasion, and that dominates one's mind, and then one doesn't really observe faults or see faults in the teacher. But this text here is really referring to the kind of relationship where you have with a teacher, where you're relying on a teacher over an extensive period of time. A teacher who is guiding one in how to cultivate or how to train in the practices that are shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. And as one is gaining skill in that, then being guided in the trainings which are shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity. And then building on this solid foundation where one's mind and where the Dharma has become quite deep within oneself, then one is being guided in the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity, including those of Tantra. So this is the kind of relationship that is being referred to here, because it's in this relationship where you're spending a lot of time with one's teacher, with this one teacher, where one is much more likely to see faults. And therefore, it is of particular importance that in your relationship with such a teacher, one takes care of one's mind and follows the advice that's given in this final sentence in the paragraph. Follows that advice to come to see the teacher as he really is. Because in particular, if that teacher, if one has investigated him well in the way that's described in our text, and he is a qualified teacher, he will be guiding one in precisely how to meditate on the various topics. And that relationship will become quite interactive, where one goes to the teacher with one's questions about one's practice, getting further guidance on overcoming obstacles and so forth. And in such a relationship, it's important from the side of the student to have deep faith in the teacher, because then the teacher can readily give very direct and clear advice specific to the student, and that the student, relating to the teacher in the way that's described here, will readily accept that, not doubt it, not question if it is skillful or not, or appropriate to oneself or not, but will rather readily apply it. This is the kind of relationship that is being described here, that particularly close relationship, a relationship over an extensive period of time, where one is truly being guided in the cultivation of the various qualities of the path.
지난미 진지대 라마 용수소 라마 간이나 차상직 로장한 따단 지버리데 이내다 소로 정한 저기 당한 견도 로계기 냥아 체쇼디 아주 넘유는 무티제 네 라마 디자인의 최슈디 그블라 대통의 통 견도하게 냥아 체용고로와 진짜디 견도 받을로디에 바가야다 견도 별로직 갑리갑리 깨봐 이내야 파 차상지수 파 장직 마도야다라서 보다 두신의 제고를 해서 나도 신의 송고를 지난 되게 인자다 베네 지난 라마 델의 기승한 줄 라미 챙시 라미 챙이 최주다 된바치 고래 세송에도 지난 차상 티 냠렌지 파 치겐 델의 되는 캐치 고고를 마다 신 뉴아즈 살직니 최저시 집에 왕지 나베는 왕슈는 왕지 슈전 무티제 되는 냠렌지 지금 받으면 되디 최주다 된바치原来 버리 메네 자라자게 메르와다 가선 살직마도 왕슈되네 무티제 장고고요 말 라마디zen 최주 장고고요 말와 나 최주다 된 보고요 세팅한테 람림 마제 기부 충이 기부 충은 투모 람이름 받아 파티 팔로 좀 제조 These are on the Gibu Jing, the Tumo Mind Belamirim party, indeed part 3 Jelopjon Jess Jella, and the Gibu Chimbelam Yirimba party. Indeed, tis and Lobjon Jess Tumo Manga Lam Yiriban Yamlin party. The negative engage and Della, Chichu that there was cool, said, and she did in issue or whatever. Jelabda Yen Mason, Yunumbu. Take my mutu and Chicken Masona, Parimba, Lap Johandela, and then Chasan Shimba Chukure. Now, Labrakin Jita Chimbujile, Sajigli, Jokot, Lajaru, Shene, Russia, and Mutin Jango, Mardit, they got Ganshe, the Yatachi, Chena Digorwa, Chenadina, the Lama Tsing to the Temple Kugre, said, Mutu Yujima, Rimban Yamlin, but Lap, Teach, Cross Yamlin Jeju, to send T and the senior Kishu Dennis Tango Warriors, the Negian, Jig Masamena, the Laptua Kalakures, rather than some course at this rua.
So, to be clear, the guidance here in this topic, which how to rely on a spiritual teacher, really it should be applied to every teacher that one has. But why I'm making this particular emphasis is because where the danger of seeing fault in one's teacher is greatest is with a particular teacher that one spends a lot of time with. So again, the teaching here, the guidance here, is to be applied by the student in relation to all their teachers. But where the student needs to take particular care is with the teacher they spend the most time with, because in this process of familiarity, it becomes very easy to see them as ordinary, rather than to see them as just like the Buddha Bhagavan. So, for example, if a passing teacher comes, a big Lama gives an initiation and continues on his way, one doesn't really have the opportunity to get to know that teacher well and assess for oneself if they possess the 10 characteristics that were described earlier in the chapter. One really just does not have that opportunity. So one receives the initiation, the Lama moves on, and one had a very meritorious experience. So in that situation, it's unlikely one will see faults in the teacher or have a critical mind. And then he's moved on, and there's not really the danger of such thoughts arising. But where this is so important is where one is relying on a teacher who is guiding one in one's spiritual journey, cultivating the various topics of the Lamrim. So all those trainings that are associated with the beings of bearing capacity, where one is being guided in one after the other, this is the teacher who's holding you by your hand, taking you along this journey, cultivating the paths within. So with such a teacher, there it's of great importance that he is qualified, that he possesses ideally all 10 characteristics, or certainly as many as possible. And moreover, that one, from the student's side, that one takes particular care in how one relates to the teacher, and ensures that one sees him for the qualities that he does have, and not as a reflection of one's own afflictions. And this is perhaps similar in other forms of education. Perhaps if a guest lecturer comes who's very famous and widely regarded, whatever one's relationship with that guest lecturer isn't of much importance, because she'll move on and teach elsewhere. But the professor that one relies on the most, there it's important that one has a good relationship, because they are primarily responsible for one's education. So if it's like that in our everyday life, so much it is of particular importance then, where we are on the journey to enlightenment, that we have the appropriate attitude towards this most precious of spiritual teachers.
Lama Gane Sini Sosuki, that Unibu Shubina, Unibu Mashubina, Wang Shubina, Lama Sula, Chazan Kichu, Yune, 다타디 균도 별로디 파기 마주 연년디 통유 로디게 계획에 장도를 해야 지부지게 하래 당에 시에데 가르쳐선 조도 신의 균링부 등의 염도 되게인데라 균토에 레라요레스 살직된 직투되는 균링부 마토베는 균토에 융하레스 제자디네자데 로도 균 장고레스데 장고레스 장도 지역으로선 조 한데레 된디게 랑 남윤의 된자는 라마지 무디지 최슈된 될 지조될 고고레 사실 된 장고레스에만 송거 시고 이내 직단다 차상이야 라마 수도장 지 라마 남윤들이야 지기 마제나 다 직차지 원슈되네 균우마도베네 라마들이야 제라 삼당고마 디키시고마다 아직도 골로테 있냐가 여러와 저선다 라마 수도가 라마 소소랑 라마 같이 예배네 균또 파kil로 파자가야다 윤nen다게 로자야디 지부지야레스 이나당아서 견도 로제기디 냥하데 그디 레라와데 가워서네 그디 용어서 가도 넘비 무티유지네 라마셀 슈제 라마 최지 슈되나 델로 견도 로제데 망아용 용아야기 냥아 체요 레소레 가시 기엔로스 망아 체거로와 남윤네 균우마 지게 양시 라마데 제기메바나 라마딜레야 견도 로제데 중요하용으로와 남지 무티유네 라마셀 슈드네 가브리엘 라마디에직 어데 저 소름 당구도사 아직 내가 뭐 그도 대중 요구도 해야 되네 요식으로 와.
So I want to be sure that there's no misunderstanding, so I'm going to repeat some of what has been said. The training that is being presented here by Lama Tsongkhapa, we as students should apply this way of thinking to all our teachers, all without exception. We should train to see them as being just like the Buddha Bhagavan, as seeing them as free of fault. And to the extent that one does this, one over time will train one's mind to only seek good qualities, to focus only on good qualities. And this will aid one's spiritual development. So again, the point I'm emphasizing now is that this training is not to be applied to some teachers, but not all, but to all of one's teachers. One needs to train to recognize, to see them all as being equally kind, equal in having excellent qualities. And why? Because they are all to be seen as just like the Buddha Bhagavan. But the special emphasis I'm making here, or the distinction I'm making here, is where it is of particular importance to do this, is with the teacher with whom you spend most time, you have the most contact. Because it's through having a lot of contact with one person that familiarity can arise, in the sense of it becomes very easy to see them as ordinary. And that then is a great danger, because it will impact on the faith one has in them, because one is not really seeing them as a Buddha. One is relating to them, seeing them as being quite ordinary, certainly superior to oneself, but not as being a Buddha Bhagavan. So therefore there's a great danger of this fault being made in relation to the teacher one spends the most time with. But on the other hand, by training oneself well, there is the greatest benefit that will follow from this relationship.
Saranistro Gabrielia and the Jimmy Paralia Dulcine Jim Horova. Cesa may Lami Anzulia Labdica Gabrielia and the Jige Yawosungoyata Gabrielia Jig Ma Anjiki Dust 6 euros Pejatangoyata in the Yosi Ungurova, the Gasan Ma Magi Loma delia Ganichin Pendo Caricedu, Sembige, Denigi Pendo. 판도를 시체 아니 마가럽 나타다 맞지 용구로와 진짜 디니 갑래 진짜 디니지도 디니 안줄이야 안지기 데 지금 가서래 견 통하고 로지에게 내가 연구를 와다. 제가 되네자 되네기 인자 되네자 견도 별로되게 장고를 해서 dorje 아니 연다대 별로되게 장고를 해서 디스 순고를 와.
For example, in my own experience from the monastery I was educated in, myself and the other monks, we go to our same teachers, 1, 2, 3 teachers, for 15, 16 years, seeing them several times a week, receiving teachings and guidance from them. So this is an extensive relationship where they guide us through all the various topics of the path. And in these interactions, there will be times when they explain points very clearly, slowly and in detail. In other times, maybe they will will skip through some points or describe them in quite a brief way. And one may have a reaction to that. It may be one may dislike the way a particular topic is being presented, for example. And at other times, advice may be given, and may be given directly, personally, to the group or to an individual. And advice may be given in quite a harsh manner, because the teacher believes that the student needs to be corrected. Their attitude or their motivation or their perspective needs to be abruptly adjusted. And therefore the teacher may well give advice in quite a pointed manner. So from an instance such as this, or from an explanation be given in a particular style that one at that point doesn't like, it's quite possible that faults will appear to one's mind about the teacher. So there is such a danger. Especially, just to repeat, this is over a period of a decade and a half. It's many years meeting the same teacher. So therefore, especially in situations like this, one needs to take particular care of one's mind.
Dene zada lamigi tuosine sosugi da lama yunden pa yunden da tenchidu chigi lamigi da chigi Gabrielia lamigi gyendo renga chig sosule chig nami chodamru dashabene in semlia and carsone or danghale chu chom taudu sa ben said sosu magawi logic gigo marwa then all king al yatrin chodam dasa saji sosuge that didn't sodam raso da sadi chigala laru skemora chishima that sosuge noranga do sosuge notre da denishin nami social pad nangora sambige samdade di ma lamig duska nawade yenden cholpa chi ru droja sosugi samno na gewe samno geada lamaya lami dusna de sosolya chi pandoya da sosodon da sungore sibigi samdade lamaya sosugi that sosugi lami yenden cholpa ton ma de gyun chola 통고 말와 제가 데니기 gyun도 로 맞아 봐다 데니나 아다랑 알디 손 다다지 제만 죽으면서 이제 진지도 소소 병으로 왔다 데데니 마도네 소소로 저랑 말와 제가 디치네 지금 말 제가 된 장고를 해야 돼 지시고래.
If one trains well like this, then if one has the experience where one's teacher scolds one, points out explicitly what one's faults are, and perhaps does so in public, in front of other people, having trained one's mind well, one's natural, spontaneous response will be one of, how fortunate I am. How fortunate I am that I'm cared for so, and that this fault that has been hidden to me, that I was unaware of, has been pointed out in a manner that is now it's abundantly clear. And one feels this deep sense of gratitude. That is the sign of a well-trained mind. On the other hand, if someone is not well-trained, they may well have a very different response and get fed up, get upset, and say, I want nothing more to do with this, and walk away. And then who experiences the loss? It's only the student. So therefore, we should take this as further inspiration to train our mind well in this manner.
Lamalia, Gyondo, Lopaki, Majuachi, Pa, Lutini, Kevin, the Nikiru Chikivan, Pa, Doriada, and the Yunden, the Dustin, 연den기 계획에 연된 통에 또게 로 계획에 돌봐 아니 로 종고래서 되네게 양내 양도시나 삼당고래서.
So therefore the advice for us specifically then is, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in the final sentence in the paragraph, that we should train our mind to eliminate any concept of fault in every respect towards our Lama, and at the same time train our mind that conceives only excellent qualities.
예, 대양 규제를 세도 대양 규제를 세도 야 규제를 세도 되지 이 그래서 라나도 주비게 한 규제를 라나도 제가 원고 규제에 디나네 규제에서 디나네 가르송여라서네 르빈 기니 연된 송스 규네 남야 송미자스 연된 송나 무릎톱 규남 송나 무미 줍제 송바다르자데스.
The text continues with a further quotation from the Tantra bestowing the initiation of Vajrapani. Apprehend your master's excellent qualities. Do not ever apprehend his faults. Apprehending his qualities will gain you siddhis. Apprehending his faults will block their attainment.
디나데 가르송여스네 르빈기네 연된 송스 규네 남야 송미자세다 랑게야 람냠len 림바바 띵게 라마텔야 아니 연된파 연된이 촌에 따지 연된도 삼다지 연된도 송고레스 지나다 규네 남야 송미자세데 되니게 라말야 규엔도게 삼노도 규네 기교 말에서 그러다 도나니디 도나디레 대시샤바도 도나지 버르자.
So as presented earlier, this is the quotation from the Buddha, which backs up what Lama Tsongkhapa has presented. Apprehend your master's excellent qualities. So this then is the explicit guidance. So we see the second line has the exclamation mark. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa, or rather the Buddha, being emphatic. Train your mind to see your Lama's excellent qualities. And then as we see in the second line, and do not apprehend his faults. So this is how we should train our mind to focus on good qualities and let go of any apprehension of faults.
지상 라마야 연된 바 연된 다 연된 공도 진짜배나 소소 무릎 톱 그래서 무릎 톱라는 무릎 세대 당한질 ben에 냠바시티네 보신 지네 지라지 여러와 무릎 세대 가래 라마즈네 쉬쉬게 소소 규라 안디 냠는지게 림바게 다지게 야 하고 해야 될 무릎 세고 다 하고 해야 될 무릎 제로와 지상디 무릎 톱 그래서 대지에 소소기 라마를 연된 따바이나 Lama delatine shugruwa yana shugruwa shubane delatine lames ma kanawa de donda shingre di shin kombaletine sosugi toba nyamlen kombe de jugure sengor top se disore 제가 연대 송나 모르 top 견남 송나 뭐 미줍세 de lamal야 균 다레다디 라메지 디는 라마지 진노르제 샤사 균 다바이나 Dine lama zizene chu shuyege deba dunye lige mara mashuna donda haumar donda hamogona di hagu wi nyamlen jokom jig sosu tobo gechi yo mara waso 제산 기 말에서 무릎 뛰는 소나 우 미줍세 되서 걸다.
If one trains well in the way that is advised here by the Buddha, the benefits will be in the third line. Apprehending his qualities will gain you siddhis. But if you do not train well, then the fault of not doing so is the fourth line. Apprehending his faults will block their attainment. So the Geshe then explained this word, the Sanskrit siddhi, or usually translated in English as attainments or accomplishments. So it has two syllables. The first is, or the second is to accomplish or to establish or to exist. So to really, it's what one establishes or accomplishes within one's own mind. That's the second syllable. The first syllable is actual or direct or manifest. So it's manifesting or directly attaining. In other words, it's realizations or siddhis. So that is just the literal meaning of this word siddhi. So to manifest or directly accomplish, which would be literally the word for siddhi, directly accomplish, and what one is meditating on, the teachings that are of one's Lama that one is meditating on. To gain siddhis of that would be to directly or actually or manifestly establish that or realize that.
제 송바들 자대에서 어디에 송바나 신지는 도시네 지금 라미기 연대 송바에나 소소는 거를 두고 가자 라말이 연단다고 그래서 선말에 견다바는 소소리아는 거를 두고 매반자 라말이 견다기요 말해서 제 송바들 자대에서 디데르사 라마 연대 시체와 인양 니 균중지의 유병원에 따나 라라 무릎기 계속 줄라서 다디 되지 강기 직시디 도나드 마제름시 송거와.
The Lama Tsongkhapa continues with the commentary directly beneath that. You should act accordingly. Thus, if excellent qualities predominate in your guru, but you think about him in terms of the few faults he has, this will become an obstacle to your own siddhis.
디 라마디 와제 라마디 지다 연년 첨부시여 바제 라마디 연대 시체와이나 변의 연년 즉 야고여 바지 연대 야고제 안 지다는 냠렘베 야고제 안 직견 중세로 지 충충어라 지 통와이나 안델이야 라메 연대 시체와 인양 디견 중세 유병원에 따나 균 중세 유여바 통제 니기 통네 니기 괜히 초는 봤다 봐이나 안봐 아나메 이디 괜도 되지 제선 디그미네사 니기 괜 초는 다 봐이나 라랑 무르기 중에 계속 교리에서 소수기다 괜다의 로디 소수기 냠네 이야기 줘야래야 바시시고래 저렇게 계속 교라스 바시시고래스.
So in general, one's Lama, one's spiritual teacher will have abundant, excellent qualities. Hence, one has chosen to rely on him. But if one perceives some insignificant minor faults, and one focuses on them, in other words, they predominate one's mind, then very clearly one's view of one's teacher is not at all balanced or in accordance with reality. Because this teacher, who has an abundance of excellent qualities, may have some minor insignificant faults. But if in one's mind, or through one's mind, one is focusing on those, one is not seeing him in his true capacity. And this will create a serious obstacle to one's own spiritual development.
제기 되발리 말완 제도 아니 소소리아 바치 책으로 와제 바치 조다로 시는 이유와.
And this one can quite easily imagine, because if one allows one's mind, one's not training well in the way that's been advised in the verse, but one allows one's mind to focus on those minor faults, because one's putting so much time and energy onto them, they're no longer abide as minor faults, but they are blown out of proportion and they dominate one's mind. Then the logical question will come to oneself: why am I here? Why am I in his presence? And one will then just walk away. And in this way, clearly one will fail to benefit from this qualified spiritual teacher because of one's own failure in taking control of one's own mind. And in this way, we see how it becomes an obstacle for our spiritual development.
ngorub tubiki, ngorub jubi gyuros. Jesa lama de lia gyun she chewa she chimbora gyun o goro yeba inea. The gyun yungene matawache lama de lia lamigi de lama de yunde ji yorwada lama gyun shu che yena yeba ina lama de lia yunde ji yorwada yunde gi chod pa dus chena samda je dus chin lama de lia deba changwa ina ane deba changwa ina ane lama ji sosulya ane ngurub yungwe gyuchagiri 해서 그러다 라마려 균유 촌에 여반의 균디 촌에 마다와지 연den이 촌에 땅지 라마래 대바 장와이나 데니기 대바 차비 연den 촌에 대비 로단 대바 차비 로디 소설 영어로 용의 규칙이 해서 지산 델레 되는 하는 줄 용어로 해서 그러
Lama Tsongkhapa continues, even if faults predominate, if you train in faith from the perspective of his excellent qualities without thinking about him in terms of his flaws, this will cause siddhis to arise. So this is in the case where one's spiritual teacher actually does have a number of faults, and that, as it says here, they predominate, these faults are dominant within him. But if one trains well in the way that has been presented here, presented by the Buddha, one will develop faith in him. And one does so by focusing not on his to be blunt, his many faults, but actually focusing on his few excellent good qualities. Because by focusing on his few excellent good qualities, one will develop faith in him. And this then will serve as a cause for one to spiritually develop and to actually attain siddhis.
Lama selingba semzampe dawa jinzang chue tam dushi yungo bo chimche rangshin yu drupare tenpa drupare es. Di tenzin di loyakpure sen keling gyoro wade. Chue tam je dushi yu chue tam je tenpa drupare es keling gyoro wa, tenpa drupare es. Chisan dushi chue tam je tenpa drupare es, lo yakpure se de keling gyoro wa. Chisan dushi yu chue tenpa drupare se be tenzin di lo yakpure es gyoro wa de keling gyoro wa. Chisan da lama 조제 가서 조제 대 우마베 따와들와 우마베 따엔자 뒤주치 데마르베즈비 덴진디 로야고 말에 빵자레스 디 빵자레스 디안 주기 絹 함제 용사기 덴진 마릭 바델레티네 용고 지상한 저기 뇽모바 참지 중에 조 디레스 絹 조처 디레스네 디르와 디렌자다 두신의 삼다데 라미규라 가 라잉아 주게 나당 nga rashing to temper to be the nyomong zore zimbede the nyomong yuzodi lamigi yakure sedi ta kyun chö dana ta chö chado da di kyun re da di no re da di lama de yakumindu lamna ni ta chagyo marwa chesna dinigi di nga zu uma bichen ta bene di denzi marik bare denzi re di nyomong ba samjeki yure din chita di kyun chado wa chita lamigi tawana le di kyun ju yederwa da 조직이 니기 교행이 니 교행이 쳐내기네 마시바체 연대인 쳐다 당내 잠 이제 다신 임지기 잔슈 다 잠 이제 냠내기 림바 디파 지기 야고직 다 라마셀랭 버 요바자 디페 마슬라마 동네네 셴드 바시지게 셴셈제 타 지기 두시네 탐지기 돈달려 두시네 지기 잠 이제 잔슈 셈고 냠내 야고슈 라마 두신 라마데 슈우진네 라마디젠 바去许多现在许呢，这个原点讲也大钱的，均有错的马大钱，原点有错呢，怕大钱的都是呢，你们那个人把都是连把的吧，就是都是呢，这个阶段的，但均有错呢，大概那我的就是点把主把开了的，牛毛把早啊的呀，过来了，这他们的呀，我们都啊，新民都啊，身边什么大人呢？你今天就是原点是许多也要买了吧，原点啥都也买了吧。其实今天上就几个那么selling不等的，那么selling不了呀。大约前年或个什么这边大瓦通过嘛的，因为这咱们这讲就是年龄人把的，那么在这里修学吧，在这呢，怕去车上学的，那么难的，那么的走路面，那么selling不去能过来噻的，呀，都现在工作生活了，安迪那现在当然做。按照呢，那么个就根据他们的根据错的马达话这原点有错的，大家原点有他的教育点把加的，都是呢，这个原点错大呢，原点有错的，俺说那么子呢， ngānsuya lentuyagi ngānsu pechi che wores worda. Gyun yu chode yobani ti su lengwa marwa dia shi pa sha sha che yuanden yu chode ya woresa deva chan din yuanden chode su len. Gyun yu chode na di ko nangme che sha shan di go ro da.
The example we should follow in how to practice what's presented in these two lines is the example of how Atisha related to his teacher Tsulingpa. So Tsulingpa was a Chittamatran, so he believed that phenomena do exist truly. And so therefore he believed that the consciousness that apprehends phenomena as being truly existent is an excellent consciousness. Whereas his student Atisha had the view of the Madhyamaka, of the middle way. So he actually knew that that consciousness, which apprehends phenomena as being truly existent, is not a consciousness to cultivate, but one to be abandoned. It's an object of abandonment. So there's a clear distinction between this teacher and student, and Atisha had a valid fault that he could point to in Tsulingpa. He could justifiably point out fault, a severe fault in the view of his teacher. But he did not do that. He also didn't deny that Tsulingpa's view was mistaken. It was mistaken, but that wasn't why he was with his teacher. So rather, he followed the advice that Lama Tsongkhapa has presented here, which was he did not focus on the fault of his teacher, which was a fault in his view, but he focused on his remarkable good qualities. He focused on his incredible love and compassion with which Tsulingpa held all other sentient beings. Atisha rather focused on the good qualities of Tsulingpa, such as his determination to strive to become a Buddha as quickly as possible so that he could guide each and every mother being to attain their own enlightenment. This is what Atisha focused on. So again, he didn't deny the fault in Tsulingpa's view, but he didn't focus on it, he didn't dwell on it. Rather, he focused on his good qualities. So when Tsulingpa came to mind, or he saw him, or he heard his voice, or he thought of him, Tsulingpa's good qualities arose in Atisha's mind. And because of Atisha's skillful training, and therefore that skillful relationship that he had with his teacher Tsulingpa, he received tremendous benefits from this relationship. He developed bodhicitta himself. And for this reason, he regarded Tsulingpa as being his principal teacher. So that is the example that we should strive to follow. That is how we should train our own mind to focus on the excellent qualities in our spiritual teacher, and any faults that we perceive, to let them go, and certainly not to focus on them, but to shift our attention, our focus, to his excellent qualities.
gyun yu cho ne dana soso liya ane yun ne gyun ya le ngoro tuwa la ya barshi chi go re ane gyun gyun se chi tongpa ne soso ge yun den yu cho ne tawa ina ane soso liya ngoro gyun yu chi go ro was yun sen dene inzang rangi lama ina gyun che chung ji yu kyang de ngwe ne tope ki nye mi sam la pong sim mang du je de ka par cha wos.
So therefore, as we see in the verse, one should focus on the qualities of one's teacher, and from doing so, one will rapidly spiritually develop. And any faults that one sees, let them go. Don't pay them any attention. Again, it doesn't mean deny their existence, but just don't give them your attention. And in this way, they will those faults that one perceives will not bring an obstacle to your own spiritual development. And this then is expressed in the final sentence in this paragraph. When it comes to your own guru, whether his flaws are great or small, contemplate the faults of thinking about him in those terms. Repeatedly generate a mind to eliminate this and make it stop.
Desa dine indala dine ki rangi lama de gyun chechong kane syobene ane sosu ki gyun ki di ngone tope ki nyemik samse de odi lama la gyun tabayna ane sosu nuru re ane dine ki gyun dine yungure sempe ki pa nyemik samdanje ane ya gyun tope semde pa yema choye che pongkore panya ki pongkore es dine ki 봉심 망도자 디네 봉기 집에 다 개주교 말에서 삼는 안에도 전고래서 진짜 예미 삼다시도 예미 삼다시도 라말레 교인시 또다 교인도 교인 삼다베나 어다디 교인 삼다베나 니 삼도디야 지기 게디나 삼다나 삼는 숙수진 교인지 통내데 교인 지에 교인 망아서 니 통화 교인 망마 통야다 디네 통야래 디네기 통화 디네 안 소수기데 라메디 교인 통나 gyundi tondi lama di zala shu mare ma shu ben lama yundi ding ya yundi ra yo mare so su gi sing mare ma shin ben nyamne ji ya yo mare jesan so su gi la ane nyomo ba se ya da ndi gi du ye gi gyu an nyamne ni tok pa di gi gyu le tu tu yo mare dene zadi dene samdana di ya go min do di nga zol par she re sha se be ge so su gi nyamne ji ya la par she cha gi du se be du samdan je lama gi le ya gyun do be sam gi ma ju ba ge di ji ju zi gi na la na lamsa di pa ka ne ane ya ne ya du chine pongsim mang du che sen ya ne ya du chine an pa gyun do lo de ki pa ma ge ba de ge ma chu ba che ge si ju zi ge yo ba na pa ge ma ju ya pa dor che pa pong go pong we sam de du chine jang du che ho re se.
As presented in this final sentence, whether your teacher in reality is dominated by faults or by excellent qualities, your responsibility as a student is to ensure that your mind focuses on his good qualities, both when you're in his presence and when you're not. And to do this, take what is said here and understand it well, that should one focus on his faults, whether there are many or only a few, all that will happen is your own spiritual development will be greatly impeded. It's you who will suffer the loss by focusing on his faults. So therefore, train your mind. Don't focus on his faults. Don't engage in discussing his faults. Rather, let them go. Focus on his good qualities. Because if you do focus on his faults, not only will those faults arise and dominate within one's mind, but one will also be looking for further faults. And almost certainly one will find them, whether the teacher has those faults or not. So therefore be skillful with your mind and focus on his excellent qualities, because they are there in abundance. Hence, you have taken him as a spiritual teacher. Focus on those. And when faults appear, let them go and refocus on his good qualities. In this way, you'll be able to make skillful use of this rare and precious opportunity one has with this relationship with a qualified spiritual teacher. And through this, you will rapidly spiritually develop. And through your development, many beings will benefit.
야구치 쪽으로 하다가서 냠는지도 가지고 교인기 삼로 지 다가지래 라마라 교인다데 야구민도 삼배나 아니지 교인 통일로디 디고 말 안 가슴질이야 코로사에 코로게 냐가 여러와 아니지 코로게다 아니지 그 데니게 교인주제야 gyunjujeya ligire, Hongkong sa ligire, di nyomo barewa, chisa di nga zulu mogoyerwa, chisa dini inzan gyunju chone takyo maris. Ta nga zulu kargu wosene sosugi yunden di nyamlingi dimba sosugi samba sangpo de yar doya de yar dhugurwa, di lame di zane yueba di tsu nga zulu ragu gorwa da, ragu zada gyun da kong la dine di rayage guapro yo marwa, chisa di da jisan gyun ji gyun mata che sosu gyun di thwa ne gyun mata gyun le ki ma ju che anti ya wo sa myo de sosu yuen den chane ko le yuen den di du che de la me pe ya wo sa be sam ta de di yuen den de su le ge de ne yu dun ba le ngo wa de de la ma ji ne shu shi ne yuen den de sosu ya ra tu gu wa che de kyap sa sosu le kyap sa ra gu wa da na di wa ko yu ya ga yu di kare ne pena ha de mi chanda chik ne ge chimbo jala shiwu ge chimbo je so ya mi de zene ko le yo ba che ko zene ngang zo ra go ne ani ko pe chik dukja she da chik khor la be ne da ju gi di ra ya dun da le chu khor la di ji pa khor la ja le ja ne ra yo ma ro da da di kar ji ge se ne 세바 고미하다 디 트롤랑게 말지지가 말사 디네시 가슴질에 라게 탑시네 그 장부라 제주도시네 소식파 넘유마든 바두자마제는 게마라 쉬야다 안님버테야다 디디치네 안 수드지 알아디 수 소소고야디 렌투야 지로도 don다조 소소수고야디 렌고고르와 소소 렌딜레 렌게 탑시 야고치고로 와다 탑시네 제자디 디네게 용고로 와다 베디도 시로와다 제자 라미기 괜히 jes나다 괜히 초래다네 데네 삼다네 연된데 술레도 맞지 라미기 괜히 중지 토바네 괜히 파다 맞지 괜히 삼나도 콜마주지 소소 삼나나래 괜히 서데 삼나도 콜마주지 안주 삼나도 괜히 삼노 콜베네 나마들 괜히 번 괜히 매봐서야 차요 말랑 삼노 제자다 저기 라미기 연된 초대 파 삼다 연된 초 삼다 라마들 연된 디도 딩알레 디나시싱하 고도 선배섬 라마지살 바추 딜라마진 소니에 장제는 소니 장배는 장의 공면도 소수규를 기운 거로 받아 디는 캡산 소수를 하고로 받아 don달레 디네시에도 받아 거두시네 제가 소수기 냠는 소수기 약고 차고 하면서 소수 약고 차발라 약고 차다지 소수기다 파 레간치르가라 남주에 대비 토네 소수기 남의 약고라 삼다지 소소로 라야기 약고 차에디 아니 탑시 가르치네 라고도 디 탑시 되니잖아 라기자 투금는서 배 삼다지 곧 탑케비 토네 조용하 저기 나주길에 냠ning 똑바로 끼고 있어 제산 되니게 라말이야 균유천에 따베는 소수에 될리도 말에 제가 균유천에 마다주 연대에 쳐다 연대에 쳐라면서 쉬제디 소수길에 냠는지 레도 받지 오래 송고로 와도 나는 님보데
A key point to take away from this is that the purpose of the Buddha's teachings is for us to spiritually develop, for us to develop our wisdom, our intelligence, our skillful means. And with that understanding, we should engage or approach the teachings. So, to be then direct to what we've looked at here, if we focus on seeing faults in our teacher, or so, let's rephrase that, when we see faults in our teacher, if we allow our mind to abide on them, fester with them, those faults will both grow and multiply. And from this, what happens? Afflictions arise. We more easily get angry in response to something our teacher does or does not do. We'll certainly engage in criticism, probably expressed verbally, but certainly mentally. And we also are likely to look down on him, seeing him as being, in some ways, a bit beneath me. So the result of dwelling on his faults is that our afflictions will arise and we'll create non-virtue. This is not the point of our having a relationship with a spiritual teacher. The point of a relationship with a spiritual teacher is to cultivate virtue, enabling our spiritual development, or to express that differently, is to be able to abandon our afflictions together with their seeds. That is the point of having a relationship with a spiritual teacher, not for our afflictions to grow. So we should recognize this and use this as motivation, that when faults appear to our mind, that's okay, but let them go. Don't focus on them. Rather immediately return your mind to his many good qualities. Furthermore, by training your mind to focus on his many good qualities, this is how you will perceive him. You'll be inspired to be in his presence. You'll readily move or go to be in his presence. And you'll want to emulate him, seeing him as a role model. And this is how you'll spiritually develop, because you'll want to follow his advice, taking that advice to heart, because you want to be just like him. So further way, to make this point, the same point, but in a different way. If you meet someone, if you come across someone who's angry at you, and they're berating you and they're giving you a hard time, if you've come to know the Dharma well, you'll know that this is an opportunity that I can put to good use, that I can utilize in a skillful manner. I can use my intelligence. I can use what the Dharma I've learned right now in the face of this angry person who's berating me. And in dependence on one's training, the response one naturally will have to this person is that patience arise. And the arisal of patience means that one's mind is dominated by love for this person, compassion for the suffering person, and wisdom, which enables one to respond skillfully. So what one finds here is that in this encounter with an angry person, one is being able to, through using one's qualities such as compassion and love and wisdom, one can respond with skillful means. And this interaction becomes beneficial. For you yourself, your own training deepens, but you ease the suffering of this deeply unhappy person. And if this is a person that one has a bad relationship with and has such encounters quite frequently, by continuously responding skillfully, that relationship will change. May not take a lot of time, or it may take a lot of time, but that relationship will change. And you may well end up as dear friends. And this does happen. So in the same way of taking our relationships and utilizing our knowledge of the Dharma and interacting skillfully in a way that's beneficial, so too with our spiritual teacher. When faults appear to us, just like Atisha and Tsongkhapa, maybe the teacher has those faults. It's okay, but there's no benefit at all in us focusing on them. Just let them go and remind oneself of his many good qualities. And by training like this, one will see him through this lens where one focuses on his many excellent qualities, and thereby one will be deeply inspired by him. One will be thereby motivated to emulate him, to have him as one's role model. And in this way, one will rapidly spiritually develop. And as the text says, one will gain siddhis.
That some people in the Tinsu like that, some not on do stunk or is or Lami and you then to keep heart, some done, some done, Lamaya, Devachaya, that Lami Socialia, Labjet Church, Stumbi, the Tibet Sociage, somebody, Socialia Church on Pemas, getting Chibori, and the Lamaya Cuba. You come here, did it, or come here, give it in Tinsu come, said Gomnadi Dinido Comcore, Lamaya, Lamiki, Kuso Yunden, Delia, Debachai, Anzulia, Chida Lamala, Deba, Yungurte, Nagic, Deba, Nagicase, Shukchevene, the Dian, Gumze, some to some Davene, Debadia, Chiktemba Dread, Jungur, Chisnat, Lamaya, Yunden, some the Yenda Chonet, and Lamaya, Debat, Gundo, Lodiki, Kimachu, Pa, some Kaya, and the Debat. Dus comia, debat pa comia, that Lamiki socially choose so much getting Chimbori, getting Chimbitone, Lamalia, Ngube, comia nidi that, Kivishinio com society, then society, com said direct, that need some time, also Dusene, Yana, some tided, Sambitone, that Lamitin said direct that. That in my daughter Lunda, Mambo de Gumte, did a shema that's not to commit it or some dana dini to go.
So to summarize, the section we're in the text is how to rely on our teacher, and in particular on the outline on how to rely on him through thought. So this has two divisions, and we're looking at the first, which is to develop deep faith in him, and the way to do that is to reflect on his good qualities. And in this way, faith will arise. And this will be enhanced by the section we'll come to next, which is to reflect on his kindness. So this is the training in how to rely on one's teacher. To do so, one needs to hear teachings and then reflect on the meaning. It's through meditation that meditation is the process of repeatedly engaging in reflection that one will integrate the Dharma within one's own mind. And to really transform one's mind, to develop deep and stable faith, it's imperative that in one's meditation, one doesn't merely repeat the lines in the text or the lines of a sutra, but one thinks about the meaning, uses reasons, uses illustrations and examples to make it vividly real, and using reasons to overcome any doubts or hesitations that one may have. So this is how to do meditation. And meditating this way will have the result that one, in this context, one's faith will be deep, stable, and abiding. So this is how to rely, this is how to train in relying on a spiritual teacher.
All right, Atisha.
So then thank you. We will finish there for tonight. Thank you very much.